The story begins when a game developer wakes up one day as the villain he created with his own two hands, the kind of villain who dies in every single possible route without exception. Well, that's exactly the nightmare that's about to become Kim Woo-jun's new reality. It's the middle of the night, and Kim Woo-jun is finally wrapping up a bug that's been haunting him for weeks. He just finished fine-tuning the game route of a side character named Daekulan van Grahan Ukline. Now, Daekulan isn't just any NPC, he's an intermediate boss, a named villain. And of course, Woo-jun made sure that no matter which path the player took, Daekulan's death was absolutely inevitable. After grinding his ass off to get everything perfect, he's about ready to call it a night. That's when his ex walks in. Now, here's the fun part. Not only is she his ex, but she also happens to be the team leader of the development team. Their relationship had its moments, but over time things fell apart. Woo-jun was a lazy-ass procrastinator, while she was a workaholic who lived and breathed ambition. Sure, she did push him to be a better person, but in the end, it wasn't enough. 6 months later, he found out she had moved on. Anyway, she casually strolls in, takes one look at Daekulan on the screen, and drops an absolute bomb. Turns out Daekulan's character design was based on Woo-jun himself. His traits, his skills, even his god-awful personality. Everything matched him. Before he can even process that piece of information, she notices her new boyfriend waiting outside and leaves without another word. Now it's almost 2 a.m., and Woo-jun is still obsessively testing, making sure every little detail is perfect. But he doesn't like this whole Daekulan is supposed to be him thing. Because let's be honest, Daekulan is a total bastard, a so-called magical genius from childhood put on a pedestal for his potential, but in reality, just another mediocre noble drowning in arrogance. His personality is so damn twisted that calling him human would be generous. In the game, he's supposed to get stronger over time, but no matter what, he remains the one character everyone loves to hate. Feeling a little mischievous, Woo-jun decides to tweak Daekulan's personality a bit. He adds something unique, something special just for him. Since this villain is practically his in-game doppelganger, he throws in a new attribute called comprehension. And because he's already in the mood, he sneaks in a few of his personal favorites: wealth, mightiest touch, sharp eyesight, and iron will. But after stuffing Daekulan with all these overpowered perks, it hits him. Maybe he went a little overboard. He quickly moves to revert everything back to normal because the last thing he needs is another game-breaking bug right before launch. And that's when he gets a text. The message tells him to look outside. Confused, Woo-jun glances out the window only to see a massive hole in the sky. The next thing he knows, a lightning bolt comes crashing down toward him, and before he can even curse, everything turns black. When he opens his eyes, he's no longer Kim Woo-jun. He's inside the body of Daekulan, the very man doomed to die no matter what. As he's still grappling with this absolute nightmare, Daekulan's sister suddenly barges into his room. Annoyed as hell, she scolds him for slacking off instead of handling his duties as a distinguished professor. Apparently, he's been sulking over a woman instead of doing his damn job. After dumping a pile of documents on his desk, she storms out, but not before warning him to get his act together because she won't stand for him dragging the family name through the mud. At first, Woo-jun thought this was just some messed up dream, but as the days passed, the overwhelming realism of it all forced him to accept the truth. He still doesn't know if this is some kind of afterlife, considering he did get obliterated by a lightning strike. But one thing is clear. He's now literally the villain of the game he once developed. And if anyone needs a reminder, let's spell it out. Daekulan is a mid-tier boss. No matter which route the player takes, he is the root of all problems, the ultimate enemy of everyone, and the reason countless characters suffer. And now, Woo-jun is him. Kim Woo-jun had a lot on his mind, but one thing bothered him more than anything. He had no clue which part of the story he was currently in. The only thing he knew for sure was how much mana he had. But even that wasn't much help since he had no idea how fast it would run out. He wasn't exaggerating when he said that during development, he and the others had tested this game at least 1,000 times. And out of all those runs, this particular character, Daekulan, had survived exactly once. Because that's all Daekulan was designed for, a middle boss, a glorified stepping stone meant to die. Woo-jun's gaze drifted toward the documents that Daekulan's half-sister had practically thrown at him before storming out. Uriel von Grahan Ukline, the current head of House Yukin, a position Daekulan himself should have held if not for whatever mess his past self had gotten into. And as if things weren't complicated enough, it seemed Daekulan and Uriel didn't share the usual warm sibling bond. Fantastic. On top of that, Daekulan apparently had a fiancé named Julie. Given how Uriel spat out her name with such disdain, Woo-jun could already tell something nasty had gone down between them. He flipped through the documents and found something even better. A contract. Turns out he was already signed up as a professor at the Imperial University, responsible for teaching basic magic and mana control. And just like that, his fate was sealed. It didn't matter that he had zero teaching experience. Skipping out wasn't an option. At the very least, it gave him an excuse to step outside and gather intel on his current situation. Before he could process everything, a system notification blinked in front of him, listing his primary survival goal, become necessary to the game. His first side quest was to deliver a lecture at the university. If completed, he'd earn 0.5 store currency. Not much, but crucial for survival. He also recalled certain routes where Deculin ended up dead thanks to Uriel's actions. Yeah, avoiding that sounded like a good plan. With a sigh, he got up, ready to tackle this new mission. The only problem was, he had no idea what he was supposed to lecture about. But then again, that wasn't an issue. He had the comprehension skill, the one attribute he had added before being unceremoniously dropped into this world. As long as he had a bit of mana, he could understand literally anything. As he changed into something more formal, Woojun couldn't help but notice how different this place was from his old life. Yet, despite never having lived as Deculin before, everything felt disturbingly natural. The tailored clothes, the aristocratic air, it should have been suffocating. But instead, they brought an odd sense of comfort. It was all thanks to Deculin's built-in attributes, intimidation, dignity, and aesthetic sense. It was as if Deculin himself was helping him settle into this body. Woojun didn't even feel the urge to act out of character. The rigid formality he once found exhausting now felt effortless. But despite knowing this was all just part of the role, there was something unsettling about it. As he walked toward his first lecture, everything felt disturbingly normal, like he belonged here, like he was meant to be one of the noble elite standing above the common masses. A far cry from Kim Woo-jun, the nobody from South Korea. That guy was just an average-looking slacker dumped by his ex and going nowhere in life. But now, as Deculin, he wanted to embrace this role fully. If he was stuck here, he might as well play the part of a proper aristocrat. He stepped into his car. Just the interior alone screamed luxury, a stark contrast to anything he had ever experienced before. Speaking of nice cars, the thought reminded him of his ex's boyfriend, the rich bastard who loved flexing his ride. But before his mind could wander too far, he noticed someone sitting in the adjacent seat. A young boy who, upon realizing Deculin was there, immediately straightened up and greeted him nervously before handing over a stack of documents. Woojun entertained the possibility that this kid might be his assistant or secretary. When he asked for confirmation, the boy looked completely caught off guard, as if he had just said something absurd. Apparently, this kid had been working under Deculin for 3 years. Woojun sighed and flipped through the documents, half expecting to find detailed lecture material. Instead, what he got was essentially a script, a word-for-word breakdown of what he was supposed to say, every single detail. There was no way in hell someone like Deculin would have actually prepared his own teaching material. The prideful bastard was too arrogant and too untalented for that. Realizing just how much effort this kid must have put into it, Woojun felt compelled to say something. A simple word of appreciation wouldn't kill him, right? So he did just that. The reaction was unexpected. The boy practically froze in shock, eyes wide like he had just seen a ghost. Even the driver stiffened, as if the world had just flipped upside down. Apparently, Deculin saying something nice was unheard of. And then Woojun felt it. A sharp, sickening sensation hit him like a punch to the gut. It was as if his entire body rejected the act of kindness outright. The sheer absurdity of it made him pause. Was this body actually punishing him for complimenting someone? What kind of absolute bastard was Deculin? Thinking back, he had felt this same nauseating sensation when he left the manor earlier. It was almost like Deculin's consciousness was clawing at him, trying to take back control. After a short journey, they finally arrived at the Imperial University, a place teeming with life and buzzing with eager students. Now that he was here, his next task was simple. Find the designated lecture hall mentioned in the documents, Rodeo Hall. As soon as he reached the hall, it was clear that the students were already settled in, their eyes filled with anticipation. Strangely enough, they actually seemed excited for this lecture. Rumors had spread that Professor Deculin was a master of spell interpretation, a talent that had once earned him the title of child prodigy at an early age. And then the moment arrived. Deculin finally made his entrance, commanding the room's attention with nothing but his presence. He introduced himself in a steady, authoritative voice. Deculin von Grahan Yukin, head professor of the university's magic tower. With the formalities out of the way, the lecture began. As expected, the female students were absolutely smitten by him with his sharp features, regal aura, and the sheer confidence he exuded. It was no surprise that they hung on to his every word, but among them sat one student who held none of the admiration the others did. To her, Deculin wasn't a brilliant professor or a noble mage. He was nothing but a filthy thief, the man responsible for her father's downfall. Almost 3 years ago, her father, a dedicated scholar of spell interpretation, had taken his own life. He had poured years into his research, only for his thesis to be stolen from him. Broken and lost, he fell into despair, and ultimately death became his only escape. The one who had taken everything from him, the so-called genius of spell interpretation, was none other than Deculin. With her father gone, she lost everything. Their home, their land, everything that once belonged to her family was stripped away, leaving her with nothing. But she refused to let it end there. She had made a vow to take revenge, to tear down the man who had stolen her father's life's work. To do that, she fought her way into the Empire's Royal University, where Deculin now stood as a professor. While the other students remained blissfully unaware of the truth, she was determined to expose him. She would prove that his so-called achievements were nothing but a stolen bluff, but taking him down wouldn't be easy. She had to be smart, meticulous, and so for now, she waited. Meanwhile, Deculin continued his lecture. He introduced the fundamentals of magic. He explained the 3 major attributes and 9 types of magic. Attributes were the very source of magic, while elements formed the materials that made up all things. The 9 types included summoning, destruction, support, enchantment, manipulation, ductility, bewitchment, and harmony. As he spoke, something unexpected happened. Wu Jun, the man now inhabiting Deculin's body, realized that this whole teaching thing was far easier than he'd expected. It was his first time standing in front of a class, and he wasn't even familiar with the theory of magic. Yet even though he was simply reading from a prepared script, everything made perfect sense to him. Not only that, but Deculin's natural authority made the students hang on to his every word. Even the usual elitist nonsense, things like maintaining strict eye contact and controlling the room's atmosphere, felt effortless, like second nature. Maybe this version of Deculin truly had the makings of a great teacher. The lecture continued, delving deeper into the nature of mana. The way mana functioned depended on where it was stored in the body. Mages typically stored it in their heads as it made spellcasting easier. Knights, on the other hand, stored mana in their hearts, allowing them to channel it through their blood vessels. Then there was the inner core, a method that combined both internal and external mana, making it the most universally effective storage system. In short, talent mattered, but hard work was just as crucial. If someone lacked natural ability, their only choice was to pick a path and focus everything on it. Ironically, Wu Jun couldn't help but reflect on how unimpressive Deculin's own mana capacity actually was. His current reserve sat at around 3,500. To put that into perspective, there are mages out there whose primary mana pools exceed 30,000. It was almost laughable that he was the one lecturing students on magic when, by all logic, he should be the one taking notes. With that, the lecture finally drew to a close. But there was one last line in the script he hesitated to say. He was certain that if this were the old Deculin, he would have completely ignored it. The line read, "If there are any students who have questions, feel free to ask." For a moment, silence filled the room. The students seemed completely absorbed in the lecture, leaving no room for doubts or confusion. Even Deculin himself felt relieved. No questions meant no unnecessary trouble, but just as he let his guard down, one student stood up. It was her, the one who despised him more than anything. She had something on her mind. Last night, an unusual spell had been discovered in the dormitories, something suspected to be the work of the devil itself. But before answering her question, Deculin's cold gaze locked onto her. He pointed out her lack of basic etiquette. She hadn't even introduced herself before speaking. If she couldn't follow simple classroom manners, then he saw no reason to acknowledge her question. Without another word, he turned to leave. It wasn't about etiquette. He simply didn't have the energy to deal with this right now. His comprehension skills alone consumed an absurd amount of mana, and at this moment, he was running on fumes. Just understanding the lecture script had drained 2,300 mana from him, and now she expected him to analyze a spell he had never seen before. Yeah. That's not happening. Meanwhile, the students snickered under their breath, thoroughly entertained by the spectacle before them, watching her make a fool of herself. They assumed she had been trying to gain the professor's attention, only for it to backfire spectacularly. The poor girl, stung by the humiliation caused by Professor Deculin's sharp words, struggled to maintain her composure. Even so, she refused to back down, still holding on to the hope that he would give her a proper response. According to her, the magic tower was refusing to investigate the matter, brushing it off as nothing more than a baseless rumor. But if it was Professor Deculin, she was sure he could figure out what kind of magic was used. Taking matters into her own hands, she cast a spell right then and there, requesting Deculin to interpret it. With no choice but to respond, Deculin examined the spell, and in an instant it drained around 1,700 mana. She revealed that several debutantes of the dormitory had been analyzing the same spell. Yet despite their efforts, they had found absolutely no leads. This was why she had turned to him, hoping that at the very least he would take a glance at it. Deculin declared that it was barrier magic. His sudden and unwavering response caught her completely off guard. He continued, elaborating that it was a bewitchment-type barrier spell, meaning that whoever cast it had the clear intention of trapping everyone inside the dormitory. With her question answered, Declan wasted no time in dismissing her, telling her not to persist any further since the matter had already been resolved, and he left, leaving her standing there, humiliated. The scene then shifted to the university's Magic Tower cafeteria, where that same girl was now stuffing her face without the slightest regard for table manners. Her name was Ephirine, and the only reason she had questioned Declan in the first place was to expose his so-called spell interpretation skills as a complete fraud. Yet instead of proving him wrong, she had made a clown of herself, and the embarrassment was crushing. Even now, she refused to believe that Declan had actually known what he was talking about. Bewitchment magic was extremely difficult. After all, most spells required specific parameters, yet Declan had carelessly labeled it as bewitchment magic without mentioning a single parameter. That alone was enough for her to call it nonsense. What she had shown him wasn't just some random spell. It was an exact replica of the unknown magic circle that had been drawn on the dormitory's front door the previous night. At first, everyone had been shocked by the sight of the unfamiliar spell, but it had quickly turned into research material for the new students. From the very beginning, she had been convinced that Declan was full of it, making up nonsense just to sound impressive. But then one of her friends came rushing toward her, breathless with excitement. She revealed that the magic circle on the dorm's front door had finally been deciphered, and just as Declan had claimed, it really was a barrier spell. After collective research, they had reached the same conclusion, meaning Declan had been right all along. Ephirine sat frozen in absolute disbelief. There was no way. She refused to accept that it had actually been barrier magic. More than that, she couldn't stand the thought of acknowledging Declan as a legitimate master of spell interpretation. Meanwhile, her friend, still caught up in admiration, rattled off endless praises for Professor Declan, going on and on about his incredible capabilities. Eventually, after singing his praises long enough, her friend decided to leave, but not before thanking Ephirine for having the guts to question the professor in the first place, since no one else would have dared. Even so, Ephirine remained unconvinced. There was no way Declan had actually given the correct answer on purpose. It had to have been a damn fluke. What pissed her off even more was the fact that instead of exposing him as a fraud, she had only made him look even more competent. Now everyone was convinced that Declan was a capable professor. Frustrated, she began flipping through a document detailing Declan's achievements, determined to learn more about her enemy. After all, there was an old saying, if you know the enemy and yourself, you will never be defeated. If she had to deal with that jackass every single day, then fine. She would make sure to expose him so thoroughly that his reputation would be ruined beyond repair. The scene shifts to our protagonist, or should we say our villain. While walking, he was dreading the worst possible outcome of what had happened in the classroom. The moment his eyes landed on that spell, his comprehension skill had activated automatically. Just a single glance at the spell circle with its tangled lines and intricate structure had been enough to drain every last bit of mana he had left. But what frustrated him the most was that even after sacrificing all that mana, he still couldn't grasp what the spell actually was. Even if he had twice the amount of mana he possessed now, it wouldn't have made a difference. The principles behind it remained completely out of reach. For now, though, he was just relieved that everything had worked out in his favor. But just as he continued walking, his path was suddenly blocked by a woman clad in gleaming white knight armor, white hair, light-colored eyes. She was a familiar sight. Declan recognized her instantly, not just because he had seen her countless times in this world, but because he had worked on this game himself. She was Julie von de Freyden, his supposed fiancée, and a named character destined to become the pinnacle of knighthood. He hadn't expected to cross paths with her this early, but there was no avoiding it now. Without hesitation, he responded to her greeting casually, claiming that he was doing fine, but Julie wasn't convinced. Her expression hardened as she questioned how he could possibly be fine after breaking the promise they had made a week ago. Of course, Woo Jun, now Declan, had absolutely no clue what she was talking about, and since he had no intention of getting caught up in unnecessary drama this early, he decided to brush it off. With a composed demeanor, he attempted to walk past her, dismissing the supposed promise by saying he didn't recall making any such agreement. Julie, however, wasn't having it. She immediately stepped in front of him again, blocking his path. She wasn't going to let him run away like last time. Seeing the sheer determination in her stance, Declan realized she wouldn't let him go without an answer. He tried again, repeating his claim that he had forgotten, this time using his recent fever as an excuse. He even asked her to remind him exactly what promise she was talking about. At that moment, the story flashed back to 1 week ago. Julie had made a vow to him. If he was truthful to himself, if he dropped his pretenses and arrogance and admitted his faults to everyone, then she would stand by his side no matter what, even if the world crumbled. Back in the present, Julie was on the verge of tears. Doubt flickered in her eyes as she wondered if she had placed her trust in the wrong person. With a sulking expression, she finally stepped aside, allowing him to leave. Deculin, however, didn't even spare her a second glance. He didn't ask what was wrong, didn't acknowledge her pain. He simply walked away. And that, of course, annoyed the hell out of Julie, though she kept her frustration to herself. Their engagement had never been about love. It was a union of convenience, carefully arranged to benefit both families. Deculin, a talented mage, and Julie, a prodigious knight. Their marriage was meant to strengthen the influence of their noble bloodlines, the Uclines and the Freydens, two powerful families standing together. No one had objected to it because on paper it was the perfect match. But reality was a different story. As time passed, it became clear that Deculin's so-called talent had never truly existed. He was not the prodigy the world had believed him to be. Perhaps he refused to acknowledge it himself, but the truth was undeniable. He had deceived everyone, branding himself as a genius in spell analysis, and even managing to secure a position as a professor. But that illusion eventually crumbled. Headlines had spread like wildfire, claiming that the youngest top professor of the Magic Tower was on a steady decline. After that, Deculin had stopped making any notable achievements. Even so, the Uclines and the Freydens had done everything in their power to keep the scandal quiet. Julie was certain that neither household wanted to become the subject of gossip. They had no intention of letting their family shame become public knowledge. But Julie couldn't just accept it. She had agreed to this marriage despite lacking any love for Deculin, but she refused to tolerate lies. They clashed with everything she stood for as a knight. What stunned her the most, however, was that Deculin himself had promised to uphold her beliefs. He had agreed to remain a truthful person, and yet now it seemed to her that it had all been just another load of nonsense. Before moving forward, let's take a moment to understand the significance of the Imperial University and the Magic Tower. The Imperial University is the most prestigious institution in the game, and among its various departments, the Magic Department reigns supreme. To put it into perspective, the Magic Department is like the Korean University Medical School, while the Magic Tower is comparable to the Korean National University Hospital, a place of cutting-edge research and top-tier professionals. Woojun takes in the grandeur of the place, his eyes scanning the vast, meticulously maintained campus. The garden with its neatly trimmed hedges and elegant pathways resembles something straight out of an American college campus. Every detail here was carefully designed, and he knows firsthand how much effort went into crafting this atmosphere. After all, he and his team had spent countless nights bringing this world to life. Yet as much as he'd love to immerse himself in the beauty of it all, there's one lingering regret. He wishes he were in someone else's body. Just as this thought crosses his mind, he senses something off. Someone is following him. The moment he turns around to confront them, he collides headfirst into the person trailing him. The unfortunate victim of this crash is none other than his assistant Alan, who is rushing with a massive stack of documents. For a brief second, Deculin's instincts scream at him, making him think it might be an ambush. But as soon as he recognizes Alan, that tension fades. Later, back in his office, Alan finally presents the documents he had been hurrying to deliver. It's a sponsorship list for the new mages this year. Much like real-world research institutions, the Magic Tower relies on funding from magical development, and the professors here sponsor promising new mages they deem worthy. As Deculin flips through the profiles, one name immediately catches his attention. Unlike the others, this one gleams in a radiant golden light, a detail he quickly attributes to his unique ability. Deculin possesses an attribute called Wealthy Magnate, which grants him an uncanny intuition for profitable ventures. The more information he receives, the sharper his business instincts become. Then there's Sharp Eyesight, another ability that allows him to visually perceive attributes, mana, levels, and other key details. The combination of these two traits makes it painfully clear. Any name shining in this golden glow is a walking fortune just waiting to be claimed. And among all the names on the list, one stands out the most: Ephorine Luna. The realization hits like a slap to the face. Of all people, the one whose abilities mark as the most promising candidate for prosperity is the very girl who is actively working to destroy him. The irony is almost laughable. Deculin knows her well. She's one of the main characters in the game. According to the developers, she harbors a deep grudge against him, and for good reason. Her father lost his life because of him. As he continues reading, something else catches his attention. Unlike others on the list, Ephorine has no sponsors. When he questions Alan about it, the answer is hardly surprising. Everyone is being cautious. No one wants to risk angering Deculin by supporting someone who might become his enemy. And yet, there's something about her that commands respect. Despite never attending the academy and learning magic entirely through self-study, her talent is undeniable. Her potential is limitless, but it doesn't change the fact that she sees him as an enemy. Or rather, he is her enemy. After all, he's the reason her father is dead. Woojin already knows how this story is supposed to go. If events follow their original path, he'll die just as he does in the game. It's inevitable. His fate is to be killed. Whether by sword, poison, assassination, or a well-timed explosion, the method may change, but the result remains the same. That's thanks to another one of his wonderful attributes, Villain's Fate, an ability that ensures the entire world despises him and wants him dead. The only upside is that anything that fails to kill him only makes him stronger. But he isn't interested in dying. Not in this world, not in this body. If he wants to survive, he needs to make choices that the original Deculin never would. Starting with this one. Without hesitation, he signs the sponsorship papers for Ephirian Luna. Handing the documents back to Alan, he instructs him to submit them immediately. He also lists a few books he needs, borrowed resources that will help him shape his next steps. Left alone in his office, Deculin leans back, lost in thought. If there's one thing he knows for sure, it's that money will be his greatest shield. Many of the deaths awaiting him can be avoided with enough wealth. Sponsoring a promising mage is a step in the right direction, but it won't be enough. There are countless enemies lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. If he wants to live, there's only one way out. He needs to amass enough wealth and power to crush anyone who stands in his way. As Woojun fixated on his goal of becoming stronger, he couldn't help but recall that Deculin's talents were at best average. If he didn't find a way to improve, he was certain he wouldn't survive, the countless threats looming over him. Fortunately, there was one thing working in his favor, his attributes. Despite boasting about controlling all four elements, the truth was that Deculin's potential lay specifically in earth and fire. When these two were combined with metal, they resulted in something unique, his attribute Midas Touch. This ability consumed his mana to unlock the hidden potential of a target. His proficiency in metal manipulation also allowed him to wield levitating blades, though in reality these blades were nothing more than refined telekinesis. However, in this world, telekinesis was an enigma, barely understood and rarely practiced. Deculin knew that if he could master basic manipulation magic, he could compensate for his lack of overwhelming raw power by controlling metal objects at will. But for that, he needed to start with the fundamentals. Without wasting time, he activated his comprehension skill, instantly absorbing all concepts and spells related to basic telekinesis from the book in front of him. Moments later, armed with this new knowledge, he focused on a nearby pen. A faint energy coursed through his body, and in an instant the pen floated into the air. His Midas Touch attribute allowed him to cast telekinesis effortlessly without any incantation. Though what he had just learned was merely the foundation, he could already sense its potential. The thought of mastering advanced telekinesis excited him. There was no telling what he would be capable of once he reached that stage. The next challenge was even more ambitious, integrating a magic circle into his body. In this world, magic circles grew stronger the larger they were. Deculin planned to push this concept to the extreme by engraving them all over his body. But first, he needed to understand his body on a deeper level. Using his comprehension skill, he focused not just on his brain, but on his heart, muscles, and even his inner core. Then the engraving process began. The moment the magic circle started etching itself onto his body, a searing pain erupted, unlike anything he had ever experienced. It felt as if every bone was shattering, every muscle being ripped apart from the inside. But despite the agony, Deculin didn't waver. Not a single groan escaped his lips. He endured it all with the grace expected of a noble. And yet when the process finally ended, he was met with failure. His mana reserve was too low, barely at 1 point. The magic circle had only managed to engrave itself onto his shoulder, and at this rate, it would take 2 weeks to cover his entire body. Even so, he wasn't discouraged. This was only the beginning. A month passed after Deculin's seminar, and the long-awaited first day of lectures at the university's magic tower had finally arrived. In a remote training area, students gathered in anticipation, eager for their first lesson. A notice board nearby carried a simple message from the professor. Before the actual lessons begin, the students were expected to prove their abilities in an environment already rich with elemental energy. To everyone's surprise, the professor had simply left them to figure things out on their own. Murmurs of confusion spread through the crowd, but the one who was most annoyed by the situation was without a doubt Ephirine. Irritated, she muttered curses under her breath, questioning why the hell their professor would abandon them like this. Just as she was venting her frustration, a girl deliberately brushed past her, bumping into her shoulder. Already on edge, Ephirine turned sharply, ready to snap at whoever had the audacity to provoke her. But the moment she saw the girl's face, her anger twisted into pure shock. Standing before her, was Sylvia von Josephine Elad. For a moment, their eyes met, tension crackling in the air. But Sylvia, unfazed, simply walked past her, as if she didn't even exist. As Ephraim focused on her task, her mind remained tangled in the encounter from earlier. She was certain the girl she had run into was from House Elad. A decade ago, the Elads, fearing Ephraim's potential, had surrounded her family's manor with troops, threatening them into submission. And yet here was Sylvia acting as if she had no idea who Ephraim was. It made no sense. Lost in thought, she didn't immediately notice the shift in the atmosphere. The magic structure she had been carefully constructing wavered, its form destabilizing. A crushing pressure filled the air, a suffocating force that made her skin crawl. It was as if her mana was being sucked away, drawn towards something unnatural. Snapping her gaze toward the disturbance, she spotted Sylvia. The blonde had just conjured a massive structure, one so enormous that it dwarfed Ephraim's creation by 1,000-fold. Ephraim's irritation flared instantly. The sheer turbulence caused by Sylvia's magic had completely obliterated her own work. Fury bubbled inside her, but Sylvia, as always, remained completely unfazed, continuing her task as if Ephraim didn't even exist. That more than anything set her blood on fire. The arrogance, the audacity. Determined to force a reaction, Ephraim decided to poke the bear. She began throwing sharp jabs at Sylvia, belittling her strength, anything to get under her skin. After all, they were rivals. Sylvia had spent years threatening her, trying to crush her spirit and force her to step away from magic just so she could surpass her, and now she was pretending not to even recognize her. Sylvia, still infuriatingly indifferent, finally responded. She claimed not to remember Ephraim at all, but admitted she had heard of a certain imprudent, negligent noble who had died. The moment those words left her mouth, the world around Ephraim blurred. That was a direct insult to her father. Her vision tinted red as rage exploded inside her. Without a second thought, she leaped into the air, magic surging around her clenched fist. With a furious lunge, she swung a devastating strike straight at her rival. Sylvia barely had time to react. A protective barrier flared to life just in time, her eyes betraying a flicker of doubt in her own ability to withstand the attack. Then came the collision. An earth-shattering boom erupted as their forces clashed, sending violent gusts ripping through the students around them. The sheer impact made them stumble, groaning as the shockwave rattled through their bodies. As the dust settled, Ephraim stood victorious, her left hand gripping Sylvia's head, her voice roaring with fury. How dare she insult her father? The sheer audacity made her sick. But as her rage boiled over, something in the distance caught her eye. A strange, mystical dark light had begun to form at the exact spot where their mana had collided. And then the screaming started. The students panicked as the space around them distorted, warping unnaturally. Ephraim's breath hitched. It's a void. The collision had ruptured space itself, and now it was devouring everything in its path. The panic escalated as realization sank in. If that thing exploded, metal fragments would tear through them like shrapnel. It would be a massacre. Gritting her teeth, Ephraim threw everything she had into containing the magic, her body straining under the pressure. But then silence. The crushing weight vanished in an instant. It was as if the void had simply stopped. Ephraim forced her eyes open only to see a towering figure standing before them. It was their professor, Declan. The mere sight of him was enough to freeze everyone in place, but what truly left them speechless was what he had just done. With effortless precision, Declan had halted the fragments using ice magic in the blink of an eye, and as if that weren't enough, he then displayed a masterful use of telekinesis, controlling the ice shards with mesmerizing elegance. The scene was breathtaking, a reminder of the true beauty of magic. Even Ephraim, as skilled as she was, couldn't help but feel captivated by the sheer brilliance of it. With the crisis neutralized, Declan finally spoke, his cold, commanding voice slicing through the stunned silence. His words marked the end of the lecture, but as his piercing gaze turned to Sylvia and Ephraim, the atmosphere shifted once again. Without needing to elaborate, his meaning was clear. Everyone else was dismissed, except for the two troublemakers responsible for this disaster. As the students hurried away, casting glances of pity at her, Ephraim could only stand there, her stomach sinking. Her face said it all. She was so screwed. As the scene shifts, the tension thickens inside the interrogation room. Declan sat in silence, awaiting the arrival of the other professors. Rhett from the Spirit Studies Department and Ran from the Support Studies Department. Seated beside him was none other than Adeline Sigillian, the chairwoman of the university. Once the professors settled in, their attention turned turned to the subject of today's meeting, the reckless student who had dared to strike down a noble from the Elad household. Ephraim, seated at the center of it all, was nothing more than a nameless nobody in their eyes, the kind of student the university wouldn't hesitate to discard. The way they sized her up, measuring her worth based on her lack of noble lineage, made it painfully clear how this meeting would unfold. Had it not been for Deculin's intervention, things could have escalated far worse. His actions had left the professors impressed, but he already knew how this disciplinary meeting would go. The daughter of an influential family would walk away as the victim, while the so-called fallen noble Ephraim, a mere commoner, would be labeled the villain. It was a script already written, one Deculin had no intention of letting play out so easily. There was something about Ephraim that drew his attention from the very start. Scarlet energy leaked from her as if she carried some kind of curse. To someone like him, someone who bore the fate of a villain, it was as clear as day. That energy was a sign of trouble, a mark that the world itself wanted him dead. And if he didn't do something to shift the outcome now, that same fate would only inch him closer to his own downfall. The official hearing began with Ran being the first to lash out. His voice was sharp as he reprimanded Ephraim for her reckless behavior, scolding her for endangering students and engaging in senseless conflict. If not for Deculin's interference, the situation could have spiraled out of control. Ephraim, dejected yet resolute, refused to speak of her reasons. Her silence came across as defiance, an outright insult to the professors presiding over the meeting. But in truth, all she cared about was keeping her true motives hidden, especially from the man she intended to bring down. Sylvia's taunts from before echoed in her mind, but no matter what, she couldn't risk exposing her goal in front of her target. Her refusal to explain only fueled the fire. Ran, unwilling to let it slide, sneered as he questioned whether she had some kind of inferiority complex, drilling into her the obvious gap between nobles and commoners. As if to rub salt in the wound, Sylvia was asked to speak next. Calm and composed, the blonde girl downplayed the situation, claiming responsibility for accidentally destroying Ephraim's work and brushing the whole ordeal off as a misunderstanding. In an instant, she had positioned herself as the innocent party, making Ephraim's actions appear even more irrational. The professors wasted no time grilling her further, throwing accusations of anger issues her way. Ran, taking it a step further, outright suggested expelling her. There was no point in keeping a student who lacked the composure to follow basic discipline. Alienated and alone, Ephraim sat in silence. Not a single word of support came her way. To the professors, she was already guilty. Every insult, every harsh reprimand was aimed solely at her, and the worst part was, she couldn't even fight back. With her father gone, there was no one left in the world to stand by her side. She could only sit there helpless as the weight of their judgment bore down on her. In her frustration, her gaze shifted toward Deculin. Somewhere in her heart, she pinned part of the blame on him. Not that it changed anything. At last, Adeline spoke, noting how the professors seemed to be in unanimous agreement. But before she could conclude the meeting, she turned to Deculin, asking for his opinion on the matter. That was when everything took an unexpected turn. Ephraim braced herself, fully expecting him to deliver the final blow that would seal her fate. Expulsion seemed inevitable, but to her absolute shock, Deculin turned the tables on Sylvia. His voice cut through the room as he pointed out that Sylvia wasn't blameless in the incident. The statement alone stunned both students into silence. Without hesitation, he pressed further, questioning why Sylvia, with all her so-called prestigious abilities, had done nothing to prevent the fight. Surely someone from the esteemed Elad household could have handled such a situation with ease, so why had she let it escalate? Sylvia, caught completely off guard, lowered her head in shame. After a moment of hesitation, she confessed the truth. She had deliberately refused to block Ephraim's attack, hoping that the girl would land herself in trouble. The silver-haired girl looked like she was having a mental breakdown, unable to believe that Deculin, the very man she saw as an enemy, had just defended her. It made no sense. Why would he go out of his way to protect her? Ran, unwilling to let the argument slide, fired back, stating that Sylvia was still the victim regardless of her role. The blame fell solely on Ephraim, but Deculin wasn't done yet. With his usual cold, unshaken demeanor, he countered that the real failure here was his own. If his lectures were so unimportant that they could be conducted without his presence, then perhaps he should take responsibility instead. That statement left Ran completely flustered. The old fart scrambled to come up with a rebuttal. Meanwhile, Ephraim sat there struggling to process the absurdity of the situation. Deculin had just steamrolled another professor, all to protect her. It was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And yet it was happening right in front of her eyes. Having heard enough, Adeline made her decision. She saw no reason to treat this as a grave offense. Students naturally clashed at times. It was only normal at their age. With that, she dismissed the meeting, declaring that no punishment would be issued. Ephraim and Sylvia were free to leave. Ephraim felt nothing but confusion. She had mentally prepared herself for expulsion. Knowing Deculin, this was supposed to be her downfall, and yet here she was, left unscathed. None of it made sense. Not one damn bit. After the meeting, Ran couldn't help but applaud Dekulin's sharp insight and analysis, impressed by the way he dissected situations. But our boy's attention was elsewhere. His gaze shifted to Ephraim, who had called for him. There was hesitation in her eyes, but she mustered the resolve to ask the question burning in her mind. She had been holding on to this for a long time, wondering if he recognized the name Luna. Did he even remember her father, the man Dekulin had put through living hell, the one who had suffered so much under him that he ended his own life just to escape the pain? The weight of that memory sat heavy on her chest, and yet Dekulin, being the master of anticipation that he was, had expected this moment. He knew she would reach out to him eventually. Ephraim, determined to get her answer, studied him closely. Would he twist the verdict of the meeting just to protect himself? Would he dodge the question? Or worse, what if he didn't even remember mistreating her father? That thought alone made her stomach churn. If he had truly forgotten, that would make everything even more unbearable. But Dekulin's response took her by surprise. Without a hint of hesitation, he told her that dwelling on the past would only hinder her growth, that she shouldn't burden herself with old wounds. And just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving Ephraim standing there stunned. Yet in that moment, something clicked. He had to know about her father, because if he didn't, he wouldn't have gone out of his way to help her. Did he feel guilty? Was this his way of making amends? She couldn't tell, but if his help was some form of pity, then fine. That was enough for her. At the very least, the scumbag professor hadn't completely erased his sins from memory, and as long as that was the case, she could live with it. With that, the conclusion of Ephraim's case was settled, resulting in an unexpected addition of 2 points to Dekulin's death prevention. In the next scene, Sylvia explains the entire situation to her father Gilton, the head of the Elad family and an Esper mage. Gilton firmly believes that the talented Ephraim Luna lost her opportunity to flourish as a mage nearly 10 years ago during the aptitude examination. That examination was also the first time Sylvia and Ephraim had ever met. During the test, the manometer reacted so violently in their presence that it predicted both girls possessed immeasurable talent and the potential to become future archmages. At the time, however, neither of them understood the significance of what they were hearing. They simply stared at each other blankly, unable to comprehend the flood of words and expectations being placed upon them. To put things into perspective, archmages are beings so powerful that even emperors cannot threaten them. Only a select handful ever reach that level, and those who do have their names permanently etched into history. Tradition states that every era produces 3 archmages, regardless of specialty, and that rule has never changed. Interestingly, aside from Demerkin, 2 archmage positions remain vacant in the current era. Adeline is already considered a candidate for one of those positions, leaving only a single seat available. It was at that moment that the Elad and Luna families became rivals, standing on opposite sides, both competing for the final position. Naturally, Gilton is determined to ensure that Sylvia claims that title, no matter the cost. His determination ran so deep that he even threatened Ephraim's father and prevented him from enrolling his daughter at the academy. Sylvia understands this reality better than anyone. The only reason her family so ruthlessly overpowered the Luna family was because they wanted her to seize the throne. They wanted her to become an archmage regardless of the consequences. At the same time, it wasn't only her family's desire. It was also Sylvia's own wish and the future that had been predicted for her. That is exactly why Ephraim's words affected her so deeply back then. In the end, she chooses to dismiss the entire matter as simple bad luck. While Gilton isn't particularly worried about Ephraim as a competitor, he is concerned about Professor Dekulin. In his eyes, Dekulin is an ordinary man who happened to be a genius at a young age, making him difficult to predict. Because of that, nobody can say for certain whether he might suddenly rise through the ranks and become a dangerous dark horse. Sylvia isn't surprised by this opinion because she already sensed his potential the moment he deciphered her trap. When the explosion happened, it was true that Sylvia erased Ephraim's mana. However, she had also secretly prepared a personal trap. Her plan was to unleash the void by turning it into a direct conflict between their attacks. If successful, the incident would become even more catastrophic and place Ephraim under even greater suspicion. The reason Dekulin fired the mage that day was because he saw through her scheme from the very beginning. Despite her efforts to avoid being noticed, even after understanding the entire situation, he chose not to expose either of them. Instead, he presented a third option, a compromise that kept both girls safe. His warning was essentially a demand that they cooperate with the version of events he created if they wanted to survive the situation intact. Looking back on it now, Sylvia realizes she greatly underestimated his abilities. More importantly, the entire incident leaves her wondering what kind of person Deculin truly is. A few days pass and the story shifts to Deculin's magnificent manor. The man is practically living the Bruce Wayne lifestyle. Dressed impeccably and escorted by his driver, Deculin reflects on his decision to support Ephraim during that critical moment. In his mind, it was the correct choice. By doing so, he removed one of the death roots waiting for him and even managed to increase his store currency. Personally, he never expected Ephraim to reveal herself so quickly during their first encounter. Even so, he could tell from that moment onward that she had been hostile toward him from the start. While his intervention has now turned Sylvia into an enemy as well, he still believes it was the best course of action available. Setting that issue aside, Deculin isn't particularly fond of attending social gatherings. At the same time, he has no intention of letting opportunities to earn store points pass him by. After all, he received a side quest requiring him to attend the Flower of the New Year event, rewarding him with another half point of store currency. At present, he still needs a minimum of 5 currency points before he can access the shop. Because of that, his current focus is on interacting with the main characters whenever possible. Upon arriving at the event, Deculin is welcomed with honor and respect. The party is filled with nobles, extravagant displays of wealth, and plenty of expensive laughter. As he surveys the crowd, he notices several named characters he could potentially interact with. Among them, one stands out more than anyone else. It's Helm, a character personally designed by Kim Woo-jun within the game. Seeing him makes Deculin feel that attending the event was worthwhile after all. Unfortunately, before he can do much else, an elderly noble suddenly notices him and loudly expresses how honored he is to meet the esteemed Professor Deculin. The announcement immediately draws attention from every direction as countless eyes shift toward him. In an instant, the gathering erupts with excitement over his presence. Any calm confidence Deculin had before arriving is completely shattered. While dealing with the commotion, he overhears someone mentioning Sir Ganesa. The moment he hears her name, his focus changes. Knowing just how important Ganesa is, he understands that missing an opportunity to interact with her would be a serious mistake. He carefully scans the crowd searching for her, but she is nowhere to be found. What he doesn't realize is that the intimidating adventurer is actually standing behind him. At this point in the story, Ganesa is the 5th strongest character introduced so far. Eventually, Deculin spots her standing on an upper floor, the scarlet-haired woman quietly observing everything below. Seeing her at last, he immediately quickens his pace to approach her. Unfortunately, before he can reach Ganesa, Helm appears and begins speaking to him at the worst possible moment. Helm serves as an exclusive mage of the royal palace and holds the rank of monarch, making him Deculin's equal in status. The moment they begin talking, Helm starts provoking him. He acts surprised that the great Professor Deculin still remembers his name before steering the conversation toward Deculin's research. Almost immediately, he brings up several unpleasant rumors. According to him, Deculin's research has stagnated over the last 3 years, causing many people to question whether his abilities and talent are truly as exceptional as everyone believes. The man isn't whispering behind his back either. He's saying all of this directly to his face. The hostility stems from their shared past. Helm and Deculin attended university together and were once quite close. However, after Deculin secured the position of head professor, Helm's jealousy gradually transformed into resentment and hostility. The original Deculin would likely have been irritated by such blatant provocation, but our Deculin remains completely calm. He refuses to react impulsively and sees no reason to argue. As far as he's concerned, the rumors are simply stating the truth. Then his attention suddenly shifts elsewhere. To his shock, Ganesa is gone. The one goal he wanted to accomplish at the event has been ruined because of this non-stop loudmouth who continues talking endlessly. Finally losing patience, Deculin walks right past Helm and mutters an insult, calling him a piece of rotten cheese. The remark catches Helm completely off guard and leaves him bewildered. Deculin refuses to waste another second on the conversation and immediately resumes searching for Ganesa, worried that she might leave before he gets the chance to properly meet her. At this point, his entire plan is falling apart. His sudden disappearance also leaves many guests wondering where he went. Deep down, Deculin would have loved to do far more than insult rotten cheese, but the crowd around them limited how far he could go. Then, completely unexpectedly, someone calls his name. To his surprise, it's Ganesa standing right beside him. Curious, she asks whether he had been searching for her. While Deculin technically stumbled across her after escaping the swarm of idiots attending the gathering, her reaction makes him wonder whether the two of them have met before. When he awkwardly claims that he merely got lost, the scarlet-haired adventurer lets out a chuckle. She immediately sees through the lie and knows he was looking for her. Ganesa then apologizes for causing trouble during their previous mission and asks him to let the matter go. With that brief exchange, it becomes clear that the two already share a history through earlier commissions. The adventurer apologizes once more for failing to recruit a talented child under his wing. It's because of her personal attachment that she ruined the mission, refusing to hand the child over to him. Now, of course, our boy is curious about the context of this discussion, and he's gained an understanding of Dekulin's decisions. He was going to use a talented child to do the research in his place and maintain his name. Curiously, Ganesa asks a question. She sensitively asks how long he's going to keep up the facade and remain the way he is. Her careful choice of words puts him into contemplation. It's true that before possessing Dekulin's body, he maintained character and acted violently, gaining many enemies and losing trust with the people in his life, even going as far as hurting others for his personal fame. But now the current Dekulin has come to a decision, confessing that he's going to live a different life. Intrigued, Ganesa is surprised. She was fully expecting him to lash out and attack her for that statement. Of course, since she was brash and acted on her own during the mission, Kim Woo-jun, who is possessing Dekulin's body, is rather surprised that this bold professor would go as far as attempting to attack one of the strongest people around at the time. It goes to show the villain's reckless demeanor. While he doesn't know much about the original Dekulin's past relationship with Ganesa, he knows for a fact that this woman could easily annihilate him with no effort at all. Two of her most prominent attributes are invincible body and master of martial arts. You can only expect her to go batshit crazy after having those stats. She's one of the few adventurers who has reached the height of her physical stats. Now, because Kim Woo-jun is possessing Dekulin's body, there was no instance of hiring assassins to do the deed for him, because if that were the case, Ganesa would have died already. While he's having this contemplation, Ganesa is wondering if this guy hit his head or ate something spoiled today. She can't place a finger on his strange behavior. Dekulin's already achieved his goals for today, so he quickens to leave the discussion. Ganesa is rather surprised and wonders if it's really true that he won't be sending anyone after her. Turning to her one last time, the cool professor remarks that it would be beneath him. This girl is literally left too stunned to even speak. Going back to the hall, Dekulin internalizes that he could easily utilize the Yukine's power to pressurize the adventurer using the guild. However, doing so would only cause his death variables to increase. To his utmost horror, the system informs him that he just prevented a death variable. Bro is not expecting to get murdered tonight. This means for a fact that Ganesa's conversation from earlier could have ended very, very differently. Even a simple social gathering event is waving death flags over his head. Poor guy. The scene switches to an adventurer who is relative to Julie. The talented knight is sitting in annoyance, clearly disoriented and in a bad mood. She realizes what must be causing her sour expression, so she boldly asks if Julie has made any progress with her fiancé as of late. Just hearing that, Julie's body fidgets. The adventurer clarifies that she means Professor Dekulin, as there were rumors spreading about. Recalling his annoying response from their meeting, Julie doesn't hide her frustration, expressing that their relationship is in the gutter. Only this time, she confessed it out loud. In a surprising turn of events, the man of the hour comes around to leave. He spots her, but he's already leaving. Despite being known for loving gathering events, he didn't even shoot a look towards his fiancée, causing people to wonder if he's got a sour relationship with Julie. This adds to the rumors about him. Dekulin's early leave from the gathering event raised a number of questions, all leading to one theory. They think it's because Julie and him had a fallout. But of course, not even the game developer Kim Woo-jun could have predicted this turn of events. A week has passed since he attended the social gathering event. This man has been putting in the work, looking at his damn muscles as he finesses that pull-up. Apart from his usual memorization and telekinetic training, he introduced working out to his routine to increase his stamina. It's mostly because he nearly died from experimenting with some crazy just a few days ago. This guy was on the floor coughing out blood in his miserable condition. Any normal mage would have died from what he did. The only reason he survived is thanks to his iron will attribute. Bro is Tony Stark. In a quest to achieve greater strength after encountering Ganesa, he attempted to engrave fire control alongside his telekinetic powers. This would aid his metal manipulation. Overall, he wanted to upgrade his core magic for his telekinetic ability, cutting off the time needed to learn additional magic. However, this method was extremely reckless even for him, and it was only after experiencing the incredible strain on his body that he felt the need to dedicate some time to training. That's how he came to develop a workout routine. By the end of his routine, this guy is looking like David Lade with his aesthetics. With his morning workout wrapped up, it's time to go to class. The scene then shifts to Professor Deculin's office, where Alan arrives carrying a message from the Magic Tower. The sender is someone of considerable rank, making the contents important, enough that Deculin immediately opens it. As he reads through the letter, he learns that an audit hearing regarding his research will take place in 6 months. For now, they only require him to prepare and submit the necessary documents before the hearing begins. Naturally, this is a massive headache for him, because it means his research is being questioned due to its long delay. The situation is especially dangerous, because Deculin's role has always been tied to his position as head professor within the game. Maintaining that title is absolutely critical. The moment he loses his status as a professor is the moment his hopes of ever returning home disappear for good. With that in mind, he decides to search his laboratory for anything that might help him salvage the situation. Upon entering the laboratory, Deculin is greeted by complete chaos. The place looks as though it had been hit by a disaster. Everything is scattered everywhere, and the room has clearly been neglected for a very long time. In fact, if Deculin had actually been using the laboratory regularly, there is no way he would have allowed it to fall into such a horrible state. While examining the mess, one particularly filthy area immediately catches his attention because it seems strangely out of place. It almost looks as if someone deliberately hid something there. Whether that's true or not, Deculin decides it's worth investigating. Thanks to his telekinetic magic, he doesn't have to dig through the trash with his own hands. As he moves the debris aside, he discovers a book and opens it. It quickly becomes apparent that the original Deculin encrypted his life's work to prevent anyone from stealing it. Fortunately, that obstacle means very little to him. Using his comprehension skill, he easily bypasses the encryption. The moment he does, a brilliant golden light bursts forth, hinting at just how important the research inside truly is. Thanks to his attributes, wealthy magnate and sharp eyesight, Deculin can immediately tell that the book contains something extremely valuable. However, the research itself is far from complete. Numerous pages have been torn out while other sections remain unfinished. Even with those flaws, the book continues to shine brilliantly, further proving the significance of the work hidden within it. While searching through the laboratory, Deculin comes across something even more surprising: a pendant containing a picture of Ephirine Luna and her father. That single discovery allows him to piece together the relationship between them. It turns out Ephirine's father once worked under Deculin as a researcher. Suddenly, everything starts making sense. The reason the Luna family despises Professor Deculin is because he exploited Ephirine's father and took credit for work that wasn't entirely his own, building fame at the man's expense. Because of Deculin's actions, Ephirine ended up living an incredibly difficult life. Seeing all of this firsthand, Deculin decides that things will be different moving forward. He resolves to finish the incomplete research using his comprehension skill. And once it's completed, he plans to add Ephirine's father's name to the project as a co-author and contributor. The story then moves to one of the university's cafes, where several commoner students have gathered together. They've formed their own group, believing they need to support one another whenever trouble arises. If they don't stick together, the nobles will constantly take advantage of them. During the discussion, one of the girls asks Ephirine what she thinks about the idea. Unfortunately, the question puts her in an awkward position. Ephirine isn't entirely sure how she feels because she herself comes from a fallen noble family. Even so, she doesn't mind letting go of her former status. As far as she's concerned, her current reality matters more, and right now she doesn't even own a residence. Hearing that, the orange-haired girl enthusiastically welcomes Ephirine into their group. The others quickly agree, and even nominate her as the representative of the commoners. Another girl with short hair suggests that they officially establish their group as a club. The problem is that they need a professor's approval first, making that their biggest obstacle. They briefly consider Professor Ran, but everyone knows he always sides with nobles, so he's immediately ruled out. Professor Carmamel isn't any better since she also tends to look down on commoners. Someone then mentions that Professor Deculin wouldn't be a good choice either. Meanwhile, Ephirine is completely distracted by a beautiful strawberry dessert sitting nearby. While she's busy admiring it, the orange-haired girl suddenly declares that they should absolutely ask Professor Deculin for help. Before Ephirine can even react, everyone begins hoping she'll make the request on their behalf. Judging by the look on her face, that responsibility is the last thing she wanted. One of the boys argues that Deculin is actually their best option because he treats everyone equally badly, regardless of status. In his opinion, the fact that Ephirine escaped punishment thanks to Deculin proves that the professor might favor her at least a little. Ephraim immediately rejects that idea, insisting that nothing like that is happening. The direction of the conversation genuinely annoys her. After everything that's happened, she wants absolutely nothing to do with Deculan. Refusing their request outright, she quickly leaves the cafe. Unfortunately, the orange-haired girl Julia chases after her and continues trying to convince her. Ephraim repeatedly explains that whatever they're imagining simply isn't going to happen. Their conversation suddenly comes to a halt when Julia freezes in place. Confused, Ephraim wonders what could have caused such a reaction. The answer becomes obvious the moment she turns around and finds herself staring directly into Deculan's eyes. Of all the moments to encounter him, it had to be now. The sight of him sends Julia running for her life, leaving poor Ephraim to deal with the situation alone. Standing there awkwardly, she struggles to find the right words while Deculan is already preparing to leave. After hesitating for a moment, she finally gathers the courage to stop him. Ephraim explains that they want to establish a club and need his approval. Despite all her embarrassment, she somehow manages to ask. She also admits that she's worried because professors usually don't approve requests from commoners. Still, while Julia's approach was ridiculous, her suggestion wasn't entirely wrong. Ephraim believes they might as well try and see what happens. To her complete shock, Deculan accepts the request without any trouble. He signs the paper immediately, and even asks for a detailed proposal to be delivered to his office later. Ephraim can only stare at the document in disbelief after he hands it back. She genuinely can't understand how his personality works. Moments later, Julia comes running back, thrilled that Ephraim successfully obtained the signature. Meanwhile, Ephraim remains completely puzzled. No matter how much she thinks about it, she can't understand why Deculan keeps treating her so kindly for seemingly no reason at all. Fast forwarding to the next lecture, Deculan is teaching the students about elements, the very building blocks of magic itself. According to him, a surprising number of mages still fail to understand the difference between categorical elements and pure elements. While he continues his lesson, Ephraim's attention drifts elsewhere. She can't stop thinking about Deculan and the strange way he's been treating her lately. She wonders whether his actions are motivated by guilt, sympathy, or something else entirely. In her eyes, this is still the man who drove her father to his grave. No matter how many kind gestures he shows, they all feel artificial to her. Ephraim believes that if Deculan truly feels responsible for what happened, then he should stop hiding behind good deeds and publicly reveal the truth. Seeing her visibly irritated and distracted, Julia asks whether she's feeling okay. The question pulls Ephraim out of her thoughts. Julia assumes she's upset because of the student sitting across from them. At first, Ephraim doesn't understand what she means, but she quickly realizes Julia is referring to Sylvia and the nobles. Ever since the incident with Sylvia, she has practically become an enemy of every noble family. Even so, Ephraim tells Julia not to worry because she would rather focus on the lecture. As the lesson continues, Deculan begins explaining the importance of magic circles. He carefully demonstrates how adding different strokes to a magic circle can alter the outcome of a spell. Building on that foundation, he introduces the main concept of the day, something he calls flowing fire. Ephraim gradually realizes that the current lectures feel completely different from what Deculan used to teach. In the past, his classes were little more than showcases of his talent and authority as a professor. However, the lectures now being conducted by Kim Woo-jun through Deculan's body are entirely different. Rather than showing off, they reveal the beauty of magic itself, while emphasizing a deeper understanding of its foundations. The change leaves the student stunned. Even Sylvia is affected by it. As someone born with extraordinary magical talent, she had long forgotten the childlike curiosity she once felt toward magic. Yet now that sense of wonder is slowly returning. Deculan continues the demonstration by presenting the magic circle associated with water. Then he combines it with the fire circle, creating a phenomenon the students have never seen before. A purple magic circle forms and instantly captures everyone's attention. The result is smooth liquid, fire flowing like water. The entire classroom is amazed by the display. Sylvia is especially shocked because the lecture explores levels of magical theory she never expected. Normally, geniuses in the magical world rely on intuition and natural talent to cast spells. For them, theory is often considered secondary. If every mage focused heavily on theory, then magic would become something everyone could approach through the same framework. The problem is that spending too much time studying, theory often slows practical growth and hinders the intuitive understanding required to master magic. That's the unfortunate paradox. To become a true genius, one usually needs exceptional intuition. Yet even the greatest prodigies struggle to explain where that intuition comes from. That's why it feels so strange to see a famous genius like Dekulin, especially one surrounded by countless rumors, dedicating so much effort to teaching theory-based classes. By the time the lecture ends, Eferine's impression of Dekulin has shifted once again. She never expected him to be such a skilled teacher. In fact, she found herself completely absorbed in the lesson from beginning to end. Her thoughts are interrupted when she hears a flood of insults coming from outside the classroom. She immediately assumes it's the nobles looking for another opportunity to harass her. Ever since her conflict with Sylvia, things have only gotten worse. However, her attention is suddenly drawn to an envelope that has been slipped beneath the door. Inside is a sponsorship certificate. Naturally, her first reaction is disbelief. Considering that everyone from House Elad despises her, there's no way she could have received a sponsorship. Even so, she decides to keep the document because she can at least include it in a report later. With that in mind, she heads to the Magical Administration office to verify it. To her complete shock, the certificate turns out to be entirely legitimate. The moment the receptionist confirms the authenticity of the seal, Eferine practically jolts in place. Her face immediately lights up with joy. She tries to hold herself together, but she can't contain her excitement. At one point, she even tugs at her own face, wondering whether she's trapped inside some bizarre dream. The more the reality sinks in, the more absurd the situation feels. Eferine nervously checks her surroundings, terrified that someone might have witnessed her reaction. She practically shrinks beneath a table after realizing the sponsorship is worth 100,000 ELN. To put that into perspective, the amount is equivalent to 100 million. The sheer size of the reward completely overwhelms her. She's so convinced something terrible is about to happen that she starts gathering her belongings as if she might need to flee at any moment. Even the staff members begin looking at her strangely because of her suspicious behavior. Eferine continues spiraling until she accidentally smacks her head against the table. The pain finally convinces her that this isn't a dream. Faced with the reality of it all, she begins to cry. For the first time in a long while, the girl who had spent so much of her life being ignored and looked down upon finally feels that her talent has been recognized. That single act of acknowledgement fills her with hope and gives her the motivation to work even harder. More than anything, it's a reminder of how one small act of kindness can completely restore someone's faith in the world. With that emotional moment behind us, the story shifts to the Yukai's manor. There, Dekulin's half-sister learns that he is currently on his way to the auction house of Schatz and Yevel. The strange name doesn't make the news any less frustrating. The moment she hears it, she starts fuming. Her mind immediately goes back to the previous year when Dekulin casually spent 10 million ellen. Remembering that ridiculous amount makes her worry about how much money he's going to throw away this time. Considering his history, she has every reason to fear that whatever happens at the auction is going to be expensive. At the auction house, we find Dekulin searching for something genuinely worth his time and money. Ever since he started using telekinesis magic, he realized that his lack of natural talent needed to be compensated for somehow. Up until now, he had been relying on a temporary solution made from wood steel. But today, he finally has a chance to obtain the real thing. That's the entire reason he came to this auction. While waiting in the VIP room, he unexpectedly spots a familiar face, his fiancée Julie. Yet another complication he wasn't expecting. The moment Julie notices him, she immediately stands up and marches over with an irritated expression. She looks genuinely annoyed just by seeing him, bringing up the incident involving Sylvia and Eferine, the two students he had detained for committee judgment. She confronts him about his behavior. Dekulin points out that the matter is already old news and asks whether she intends to blame him for it. Julie maintains a stern expression and criticizes him for crushing the dreams of young students with his attitude. She warns him not to repeat the same mistakes again and finishes by saying it's the last piece of advice she'll ever give him. The implication is obvious. She's practically announcing the end of their relationship. Dekulin calmly processes her words and immediately understands that she wants to break off their engagement. Surprisingly, he doesn't mind at all. Despite Julie's beauty, he has no interest in marrying someone over a meaningless obligation, especially not in a life that isn't even truly his own. On top of that, Julie is basically a walking collection of death flags. There are countless ways being connected to her could get him killed, and for all he knows, he could literally die on the day of their wedding. Rather than responding, he remains silent until she starts walking away. However, one thing still catches his attention. Julie isn't the type of person who attends auctions, so he can't help wondering why she's here. Deciding to tease her a little, he asks whether she really came all the way just to annoy him. The question instantly embarrasses her. She denies it and insists she came because she was looking for something. Dekulin tells her to relax because she somehow managed to jump from 0 to 100 in the span of a few seconds. Julie leaves in a huff, visibly pouting. Oddly enough, Deculin finds the expression somewhat cute. That realization immediately catches him off guard. A sudden emotion surges through him, making him wonder whether Kim Woo-jun is slowly being influenced by Deculin's original feelings. Up until now, he has managed to keep his own personality firmly in control. Before he can think further about it, an announcement rings throughout the auction house, informing everyone that the auction is about to begin. Deculin quickly dismisses the strange feeling and assumes it's merely a reaction from the body he inhabits. As the auction starts, the first item is revealed, a special vase crafted by a unique artisan from the East. The moment it appears, Deculin notices the same golden glow radiating from it that he previously saw surrounding his research materials. To him, that shining light is proof that the item possesses extraordinary value. The bidding begins, and after several offers from other participants, Deculin raises the price to 2.5 million LN. The item is immediately sold to him. The reason he buys it isn't because he likes vases. It's because he knows the object's actual value exceeds the money spent on it. Fortunately, money isn't a problem for him. The man is sitting on roughly 200 million ELN in his account. The vase is only the beginning. Throughout the auction, Deculin continues purchasing valuable items, including a special ring, a pair of unique scissors, and a rune necklace. Even after acquiring all of those treasures, he still casually places another bid worth 5.5 million ELN. The audience is stunned by how aggressively Professor Deculin is spending money. Julie, meanwhile, sees it differently. In her eyes, he's simply an attention seeker with too much wealth and no meaningful way to spend it. To her, their personalities are completely incompatible. While he wastes enormous amounts of money without hesitation, she came here with a very specific goal in mind. She wants to obtain the Winter's Fire. Eventually, the final item of the auction is unveiled. It's an incredibly rare ore carrying immense historical significance, a treasure often described as nature's own magic. The legendary snowflare stone known as Winter's Fire is finally revealed. Its appearance leaves both Deculin and Julie captivated. Within the game, this stone ranks among the 10 rarest metals in existence. Although it is most commonly used in sword forging, its true value lies in its paradoxical nature. The stone simultaneously contains the essence of both heat and cold. Only dragon bones are considered more valuable. For Deculin, this ore is exactly what he came for. Unfortunately, Julie wants it just as badly. The bidding escalates rapidly as various participants drive the price higher and higher until it eventually reaches 30 million ELN. Julie confidently places what she believes will be the winning bid. Her face begins to brighten with excitement as victory seems certain. Then everything changes when a single voice raises the price to 31 million ELN. The bidder is Deculin. Julie immediately turns toward him in frustration. She can't believe her own fiancé is interfering with the one item she desperately wants. Determined not to lose, she raises the bid to 32 million. Deculin immediately responds with 33 million. The rivalry quickly becomes the center of attention. Many people find it strange that Professor Deculin is fighting so fiercely over a sword forging material. Some even assume he plans to buy the stone and give it to Julie as a gift. In their eyes, that's the only logical explanation for why he's preventing her from purchasing it herself. Meanwhile, Deculin suddenly realizes exactly who he's competing against. The fact that Julie is bidding this aggressively confirms how important the snowflare stone is to her. If he wins, she'll probably resent him for the rest of her life. At the same time, he desperately wants the stone as well. This is the first time it has appeared in 3 years, and there's no guarantee another opportunity will come anytime soon. Even though he knows he's taking a major risk, Deculin decides he's willing to gamble. The bidding war intensifies as both sides continue pushing the price higher. Eventually, the number reaches an astonishing 42 million ELN. At that point, the hammer falls and the snowflare stone officially belongs to Professor Deculin. The crowd erupts into applause, treating the entire exchange like some legendary battle. In reality, it was just two incredibly wealthy people throwing absurd amounts of money at each other. Most spectators end up blaming Julie for being stubborn because they still believe Deculin purchased the stone for her sake. Julie, on the other hand, is absolutely furious. Her blood is practically boiling. The situation reminds her of what happened the previous year. Back then, Deculin showered her with expensive gifts and jewelry during their engagement celebration. While everyone else viewed it as a grand, romantic gesture, Julie remembers it as one of the worst days of her life. The Deculin of that time only wanted to flaunt his wealth and power, which made her despise him even more. Rather than feeling appreciated, she felt humiliated. Throughout all these years, there has only ever been one thing she truly wanted from Deculin, and it was the one thing he never gave her. Eventually, she ruined her own engagement day by walking away. But the incident also wounded Deculin's pride. Despite her achievements and dignity as a knight, she ended up tied to a professor with a terrible reputation. Although the relationship helped her obtain the position of captain, It also exposed her to endless gossip and nasty rumors. Julie knows Deculin was responsible for spreading many of those rumors in the first place. As a result, her hatred for him only deepened, and that day cemented her belief that he was completely unworthy of her affection. Now, after losing the Snowflare Stone, she's experiencing those same feelings all over again. To her surprise, however, Deculin approaches her. Wearing an unusually gentle expression, he asks whether she had been trying to obtain the Snowflare Stone as well. Still consumed by anger, Julie assumes he's mocking her and prepares to argue. Instead, she hears something she never expected. Deculin apologizes. The simple words leave her frozen in place. For a moment, she genuinely struggles to process what she just heard. Deculin is not the kind of person who apologizes, yet he does exactly that before politely excusing himself and walking away. Julie is left standing there with countless thoughts racing through her mind, completely unable to understand why he apologized in the first place. As she continues on her way, still trying to make sense of everything, she encounters her majestic older sister Josephine, who invites her to come along for a ride. The scene cuts back to Deculin, who fully understands why Julie was so furious after losing the Snowflare Stone. Looking back on everything that happened, he's actually surprised that no death variables were triggered despite taking away the one item she desperately wanted. The whole situation makes him think about Deculin's original personality and wonder what kind of actions eventually led Julie to kill him in one of the possible routes. Pushing those thoughts aside, he returns home and is greeted by the manor's maids. However, they seem unusually nervous about something. The moment they mention that Uriel has come to visit, Deculin immediately freezes. Before he can even prepare himself, his half-sister suddenly appears behind him and starts confronting him about the absurd amount of money he spent at the auction. She's furious. In her eyes, that money should have been invested into mines and other profitable ventures. Yet he casually burned through it at an auction house. Trying to calm the situation, Deculin explains that the items he purchased will eventually generate profits far beyond what he spent. Unfortunately, that explanation only makes things worse. Uriel is already convinced he's treating her like a disposable servant whose sole purpose is cleaning up after his mistakes. Even Deculin can tell he's standing on dangerous ground. His sister is practically in tears as she vents about constantly having to deal with the consequences of his reckless behavior. Uriel continues unloading years of frustration. She reminds him of the family's financial struggles and everything she has done to keep their estate afloat. While she worked tirelessly to support the family, he went and spent an outrageous amount of money without a second thought. Her anger becomes so intense that even the atmosphere around her begins to change. A red aura starts radiating from her while her voice grows colder and more serious. To her, Deculin isn't just irresponsible. He's an idiot who gambled away money that rightfully belonged to the Yukine estate. At that exact moment, Deculin's villain's fate attribute activates. The ability only reacts when genuine danger is nearby, meaning he's dangerously close to experiencing a death variable. At the same time, he notices a golden light hidden within Uriel's aura. That light tells him something important. If he mishandles this situation, he's probably dead. If he resolves it properly, however, he stands to gain significant rewards. It is essentially an opportunity disguised as a disaster. Knowing he has to act quickly, Deculin tells Uriel not to worry. Unsurprisingly, this turns out to be possibly the worst response imaginable. She immediately explodes again, listing every hardship she endured and every sacrifice she made for the sake of her ungrateful brother. Deculin's response only makes things stranger. He calmly tells her that she never needed to carry all those burdens alone. Naturally, that doesn't help. Uriel immediately points out that he's the reason those burdens existed in the first place. Ever since their parents died, the family's finances have steadily deteriorated because of his actions. On top of that, spending 150 million ELN in a single day is no laughing matter. Realizing he needs something drastic to stop her, Deculin suddenly makes a shocking declaration. He tells her he's willing to hand over the position of family head. The statement instantly stops her in her tracks. For a moment, she genuinely can't process what she just heard. Deculin repeats himself and confirms that he means every word. Just seconds ago, Uriel looked ready to strangle him. Now she's completely flustered. She assumes he's joking around while Deculin thinks she's dragging the conversation out unnecessarily. To prove his sincerity, he even says he's willing to swear an oath if she refuses to believe him. That only shocks her further. Taking such an oath is dangerous because breaking it could cost him his life. She can't understand where any of this is coming from, and even wonders whether he suffered a concussion on the way home. Deculin doesn't particularly care whether she believes him or not. Eventually, Uriel accepts his offer, although she warns him that she'll personally bury him if he ever goes goes back on his word. With that threat hanging in the air, she immediately leaves to clean up the latest mess he created. Once Uriel is gone, Deculin receives 2 points for eliminating a death variable, letting out a relieved sigh. He realizes just how close that encounter was. Personally, he has no issue handing over the position of family head. If things continue progressing this smoothly, he believes his chances of eventually escaping this world are growing better and better. Just then, Ganesa unexpectedly appears. She comments on the conversation she overheard and admits that he genuinely seems serious about changing himself. After apologizing for dropping by, unannounced, she explains that she was honestly shocked by what she witnessed. Deculin brushes it off and claims there was nothing remarkable about it. In his opinion, Uriel would simply make a better head of the family than he ever could. Ganesa then reveals the results of an investigation and drops a piece of information that completely catches him off guard. According to her findings, Uriel doesn't possess a single drop of Yukine blood. The revelation genuinely surprises Deculin because it wasn't part of the original game at all. He already knew they weren't directly related, but discovering that they shared no blood connection whatsoever is an entirely different matter. Seeing his reaction, Ganesa reminds him that he was actually the one who requested the investigation in the first place. Even so, Deculin remains remarkably calm and says that it doesn't matter to him. That answer surprises Ganesa more than the revelation itself. She never expected such an indifferent response. Nevertheless, she agrees to keep the information secret. Before leaving, Ganesa shares another important update. The 6 snakeheads have begun making moves. These individuals serve as the leaders of a notorious criminal organization, and each of them carries a bounty worth millions. As she prepares to leave through the window, she pauses, long enough to deliver one final warning. The 6 snakeheads are after the item Deculin purchased at the auction, and he should be far more careful moving forward. In her opinion, he's been neglecting his magical defenses lately. With that warning delivered, she disappears into the night, leaving behind only a white handkerchief. As for the revelation about Uriel, Deculin finds that he genuinely doesn't care. Whether she shares his blood or not changes absolutely nothing. After all, he isn't the real Deculin. To him, Uriel will always be family regardless of biology. Meanwhile, deep within a forest, Ganesa and her companions gather around a campfire while discussing Deculin's recent behavior. Ganesa seems somewhat impressed by the changes she's witnessed, but one of her men immediately teases her. According to him, she's always had a weakness for handsome men, making her judgment unreliable. The comment instantly earns him a furious reaction, with Ganesa threatening to chop him into pieces. As the group continues bickering, an adventurer who also happens to be related to Julie admits that she's surprised to discover Deculin possesses a human side after all. Brushing the dirt from her clothes, Ganesa agrees and confirms that he really has changed. Because of that, she tells everyone that they no longer need to search for a magic slave for him. She then orders the group to return and instructs them to keep everything they witnessed today completely secret. With that, the adventurers activate teleportation magic, and a brilliant flash of light carries them away into the night sky. The following day, inside the Magic Tower at Imperial University, Deculin spends some time browsing through the system store. While looking through the available options, he discovers a level 1 attribute capable of improving both mana quality and mana output. It immediately catches his attention because it's exactly the kind of upgrade he needs right now. Unfortunately, the attribute costs 10 store currency. Although he finally has access to the store itself, he doesn't actually possess enough currency to buy anything. The system only allows skills and attributes to be purchased using store currency, and that currency is restricted according to the store's level. To make matters worse, every time he gains access to a higher level, the price of everything doubles. Deculin understands that this isn't something he can afford to waste. He has been steadily incorporating training into his daily routine. But one major weakness still remains: his physical condition. If he wants to improve efficiently, he needs higher quality mana, which would allow him to train at a much greater level. At the moment, he's still short by 4 store currency. Realizing that he needs those points as quickly as possible, he begins thinking about ways to earn them. While considering his options, Alan arrives looking unusually worried. He hands Deculin the latest issue of Wizard Journal. As Deculin flips through the pages, he quickly notices a wanted notice featuring a man known as Lockhart, the infamous wizard killer. According to the report, the criminal has recently been spotted around the outskirts of the region. Deculin immediately recognizes the danger. The wizard killer is a notorious threat to mage players and has already begun appearing within the story. Even so, Deculin doesn't seem particularly alarmed. Since he isn't an ordinary mage, he doesn't view Lockhart the same way others do. In fact, he sees the situation as a potential opportunity to earn additional store currency. Deep down, he almost hopes their paths cross. Turning toward Alan, Deculin calmly reassures him that there is no reason to panic and instructs him to spend his time in the library instead. Then, completely out of nowhere, there, he asks Alan whether he would like to become an assistant professor. The unexpected offer leaves Alan absolutely speechless. He can barely believe what he's hearing. After all, Deculin has spent years criticizing his lack of talent, so receiving a recommendation from him feels impossible. As Alan begins firing off question after question, Deculin quickly shuts him down and tells him to be quiet. He then hands him a bangle bearing the Yukine emblem. The gesture overwhelms Alan, who immediately expresses his gratitude. Meanwhile, Deculin reflects on how valuable Alan's skills will be in the future. While Alan may not be exceptionally talented as a mage, he's extremely reliable when it comes to organizing paperwork, managing documents, and handling countless small tasks. Deculin has no intention of letting him leave. Many people abandoned him because of his cold personality and harsh attitude, but Alan remained loyal through everything and continued, handling his responsibilities without complaint. Wanting to reward that loyalty, Deculin gives him a generous amount of money and suggests that he go enjoy a proper meal. With that taken care of, Deculin heads toward the staff-only library. His goal is to study Luna's research papers regarding the creation of pure elements. However, once he begins reading through the material, he quickly notices numerous flaws and mistakes. Naturally, he starts correcting them. At the same time, he's also searching for valuable grimoires related to manipulation magic that might prove useful. While moving through the aisles of the library, Deculin suddenly notices Sylvia browsing through the shelves. Her presence immediately catches his attention because she shouldn't be there in the first place. The room is reserved exclusively for faculty members. Roughly 10 minutes earlier, Sylvia had entered the executive reading room while searching for study materials. The librarian had initially refused to let her inside because students weren't permitted access. However, another professor stepped in and overruled the decision. Professor Ran argued that Sylvia's status as the heir of House Elad and the current year's top rookie mage justified making an exception. Left with no real choice, the librarian reluctantly allowed her to enter. Sylvia's reason for being there had nothing to do with status, though. She has always been passionate about literature and languages. On this occasion, she was searching for a novel written in Ethanel, the language once spoken by the long-extinct fairies. Books written in that language are incredibly rare, which is precisely why she ventured into a place normally off-limits to students. Completely absorbed in her search, Sylvia doesn't notice Deculin approaching until he suddenly questions her presence in the executive reading room. He immediately asks why she's there, and even warns her that she might find herself standing before a disciplinary committee again. The comment catches her completely off guard. Having already heard rumors about Deculin's strict attitude regarding libraries, Sylvia briefly wonders whether he truly intends to drag her before another committee. Quickly gathering herself, she explains that Professor Ran granted her permission to enter while she searched for a specific document. The explanation only makes Deculin more critical of the situation. He immediately concludes that both Ran and the librarian ignored university regulations and believes everyone involved deserves punishment for it. As Sylvia processes his response, Deculin takes the book from her hands and glances at its contents. Instantly, he recognizes it as an ethanol novel. Curious, he questions whether she can actually read it, though he notes that this isn't his primary concern at the moment. Sylvia defends herself by explaining her interest in literature and ancient languages. Deculin doesn't pursue the topic any further, choosing to let the matter rest for now. However, he makes his position perfectly clear. If she breaks regulations again without proper authorization, disciplinary action will follow. He also advises her not to rely on the influence of the Elad family whenever she wants access to restricted areas. Instead, she should arrange for someone with proper authorization to borrow the books on her behalf. With that warning delivered, Deculin simply turns around and walks away. Left standing there, Sylvia silently fumes. The encounter leaves her feeling deeply embarrassed. All she wanted was to learn more about the fairies and understand the Ethanel language better. Yet Deculin questioned whether she was even capable of reading the novel due to the inconsistencies and complexities of the language itself. At the same time, she notices something strange. Despite confronting her, Deculin never seemed particularly focused on punishing her unauthorized presence. That realization lingers in her mind long after he leaves. Meanwhile, deep within the jungle, a group of adventurers moves through a dense forest while tracking a magical beast. Deculin quietly observes them, noting how composed and disciplined they remain, despite this being their very first practical training exercise. The group is currently inside the Mountain of Darkness, one of the most important locations under the Magic Tower's jurisdiction. Because of its significance, the area is heavily secured and constantly monitored. The forests surrounding the mountain also serve as training grounds for students near the university, due to their abundance of magical resources. However, those same resources attract countless dangerous creatures. Venomous monsters roam the region, making it a highly hazardous environment. To deal with the threat, the Magic Tower maintains protective barriers and regular patrols throughout the area. During preparations, Professor Ran expresses concern over the the fact that the position of head professor responsible for overseeing the Mountain of Darkness remains vacant. To everyone's surprise, Deculin steps forward and volunteers for the role himself. The decision immediately earns the approval of the other professors. One of them even quietly reflects that this is exactly how a true leader should behave. In reality, Deculin's motivation has very little to do with leadership. A side quest called Darkness of the Magic Tower has appeared before him, offering store currency along with an additional achievement reward. More importantly, he feels a strange pull drawing him toward the mountain itself. That sensation makes him suspect there is another reason hidden behind the quest. From his knowledge of the game, he knows that this event marks a major turning point in the story. It's the point where the game slowly begins transforming into something closer to a horror experience. Once the head professor position is settled, preparations are completed, and everyone sets off for the expedition. Several hours pass. Roughly 9 hours later, the scene shifts away from the mountain and over to a cafe near the Magic Tower, where Ephraim and her friends are happily enjoying snacks together. The mood is cheerful as they celebrate Ephraim's recent sponsorship and her newly acquired 100,000 elan. Ephraim enthusiastically offers to pay for everything herself. As they eat, the conversation naturally shifts toward their newly approved club and the plans they have for their first official gathering. During the discussion, one of her friends brings up a recent training session held at the Mountain of Darkness. Apparently, around 50 participants volunteered for it, despite the occasional accidents that occur there. Before the conversation can continue much further, a sudden scream echoes through the area. Moments later, the ground trembles beneath them. Alarmed, everyone rushes outside. There, they spot a person running frantically while shouting for help. Something about the situation immediately feels wrong to Julia, who calls out for Ephraim to stop. Unfortunately, Ephraim ignores the warning and keeps running toward the disturbance. After covering some distance, she suddenly stops and turns around, only to discover that all of her friends have vanished. Confusion immediately sets in. The surroundings no longer look familiar, and somehow she has become completely separated from the others. Remembering the desperate cries for help, she spots a figure in the distance and calls out to them. However, as the distance closes, her instincts begin screaming that something is wrong. A horrifying shriek erupts from the figure, and its appearance twists into something monstrous. Realizing she's under attack, Ephraim immediately prepares herself for battle. Before she can make a move, Deculin suddenly appears out of nowhere, startling her. Seeing the situation, Ephraim instantly jumps to conclusions and accuses him of attacking an innocent civilian. She even questions what right he has to do such a thing. Deculin remains completely calm and simply tells her to look more carefully as the illusion surrounding the figure begins to fade. The truth is revealed. The person wasn't human at all. It was a demon. Deculin explains that she had fallen victim to an illusion spell, one of the most common tricks employed by demons. Ephraim still tries to get involved, but Deculin coldly orders her to
stay out of it. At that exact moment, the demon launches itself toward him. Forced to respond, Deculin enters combat. The creature attempts to flee, only fueling his anger further. As the battle begins, Deculin carefully analyzes his opponent. He quickly identifies illusion magic as the demon's primary ability and notices the glowing core embedded within its forehead. Thanks to his natural resistance against mental interference, the creature's illusions are completely ineffective against him.
As the fight intensifies, something else begins awakening inside him. Deculin's blood starts boiling with fury due to the Yukine bloodline flowing through his veins. The Yukine family has long been famous for its exceptional ability to hunt demons. Their lineage naturally purifies surrounding mana, improves mana quality, and significantly strengthens their effectiveness against demonic creatures. The downside is that it also amplifies aggression whenever a demon is nearby. That ancient instinct now comes roaring to life within Deculin. The legacy that made the Yukines feared by demons for generations fully awakens, pushing him toward battle. Rather than resisting it, Deculin embraces the feeling and vows to destroy the creature before him. His rage continues to rise as the demon charges forward with everything it has. Meanwhile, a notification appears before him. The side quest has been completed. He earns additional store currency and officially secures his first demon kill. Alongside that achievement, the Yukine attribute is successfully unlocked. Calling the demon filthy, Deculin finishes the battle and puts an end to the creature once and for all. However, the victory doesn't leave him feeling relieved. As he takes a closer look at the demon's corpse, something about its presence deeply unsettles him. A realization suddenly strikes him. This demon didn't appear by coincidence. Its existence means something far more important. The appearance of the creature proves that the game story is continuing to advance on its own. Even without a player actively pushing events forward, the world itself is moving according to its intended progression. That realization leaves Deculin shaken because it confirms that the dangers waiting ahead are real. The next day inside the university building, Ephraim suddenly wakes up in a panic and lets out a scream. Disoriented and terrified, she finds herself lying in a ward bed with a nurse sitting nearby. The nurse calmly asks if she's finally awake. Ephraim vaguely remembers being inside the forest, but the details feel blurry and fragmented. Seeing her confusion, the nurse explains what happened. A demon had appeared at the mountain of darkness, and Ephraim was caught inside one of its illusions, causing her to lose consciousness. After being discovered, she was brought back safely. To her annoyance, she learns that the person who saved her was none other than Professor Deculin. Looking toward the clock, Ephraim asks what day it is, only to receive another shock. The nurse reveals that she has been unconscious for 36 hours. It is already Wednesday. Realizing how much time she has lost, Ephraim immediately panics, spotting her two friends nearby. She rushes out and barely makes it to class in time. Her friend is relieved to see her awake and explains that she visited the clinic multiple times while Ephraim remained unconscious. As everyone settles into their seats, they learn that today's lesson will be a special class. Not long afterward, Deculin enters the classroom with Alan following behind him while carrying a box. Ephraim immediately notices the unfamiliar sight and wonders what Alan is doing there. Without wasting any time, Deculin introduces him to the class and announces that Alan will be serving as his teaching assistant from now on. The revelation surprises the students. Deculin has always taught alone, so nobody expected him to suddenly take on an assistant. Some begin speculating that becoming his teaching assistant might be a valuable addition to someone's career. Although Deculin's reputation makes that assumption questionable, hearing the announcement causes Ephraim to think of her father. Despite his abilities, her father never managed to secure a teaching assistant position even at the age of 30. That memory makes her question why Deculin suddenly chose Alan for the role. Before anyone can dwell on it for too long, Deculin explains that today's lesson will focus on practical experience rather than ordinary theory. He presents the students with an assignment and gives them a strict time limit of 3 hours to complete it. As Ephraim starts working, her concentration keeps drifting back toward thoughts of her father. She notices that the bracelet she wears bears a resemblance to something connected to Deculin, causing her to wonder what kind of relationship her father truly had with him. Combined with Deculin's recent generosity, the mystery only grows more confusing. Pushing those thoughts aside, she focuses on the task. Meanwhile, Sylvia completes the assignment in only 25 minutes and 15 seconds. The classroom is left stunned. Many students can't believe she finished in less than half an hour. Alan and Deculin silently observe the result, and after a brief review, Deculin gives Sylvia permission to leave. While Sylvia feels relieved to be dismissed so quickly, her resentment toward him remains as strong as ever. As more time passes, Ephraim continues struggling with the assignment. One by one, students either finish or run out of time, and Deculin dismisses them accordingly. Eventually, the entire classroom empties until Ephraim becomes the only student remaining. By this point, Ephraim feels completely hopeless. Convinced that she has failed, she drops her head onto the desk while desperately trying to think of a solution. Looking back at Sylvia's performance only makes things worse. Not only did she fail to surpass Sylvia, but she also ended up as the only student who couldn't complete the assignment within the allotted time. Frustration quickly turns inward. She begins insulting herself, calling herself stupid, incompetent, and completely useless for failing something that seems so simple. The longer she sits there, the deeper she sinks into self-loathing. Then a voice suddenly breaks the silence. Deculin points out that 5 hours and 40 minutes have already passed and asks how much longer she intends to keep him waiting. Startled, Ephraim immediately looks up and realizes he's still sitting there. He never left. Rather than comforting her, Deculin criticizes her behavior. He points out that she failed to complete a simple assignment on time and then wasted even more time having a breakdown over it. According to him, it doesn't matter who mocks her, who surpasses her, or whether someone she despises is standing directly in front of her. A mage must remain calm, rational, and logical at all times. He bluntly states that someone with such a weak mentality will never reach his level. The I know disappointment in his voice is obvious before he turns around and leaves the room. Left alone, Ephraim sits in stunned silence. The classroom is empty, and the only sound remaining is the ticking of the clock. Suddenly, she slams her fist against the desk in frustration. Deculin's harsh words continue echoing through her mind, especially his remarks about believing in her potential. At first, she wants to reject everything he said, yet the more she repeats his words to herself, the more determined she becomes. As her emotions surge, a green light suddenly erupts from her bracelet. Its aura wraps around her body as her determination reaches a boiling point, fueled by frustration, anger, and stubbornness. She swears that she will finish the task no matter what. Meanwhile, Deculin reflects on everything that happened while training Ephraim. Although he invested considerable time and effort into pushing her, he believes it was necessary. The appearance of a demon at the Mountain of Darkness was a warning sign. The main quest is about to begin. As the coming age of overwhelming evil approaches, powerful individuals with strong moral convictions will emerge. Among them will be a far stronger version of Ephirine. Right now, she lacks mental toughness and doesn't fully understand the responsibilities that come with being a mage. However, Deculin expects her to overcome those flaws and eventually grow into a formidable force, one powerful enough to threaten even him. Despite that possibility, Deculin remains confident. He believes effort matters more than destiny and refuses to allow someone else's fate to place them above him. Eventually, Ephirine arrives at Deculin's office carrying the completed assignment. Presenting the results, she proves that she managed to finish what everyone else thought she couldn't. Deculin notes that the task took her 6 hours and 25 minutes to complete. While he openly acknowledges her disadvantages as someone who didn't graduate from the academy system, he also can't deny the quality of her work. In his evaluation, the result deserves first place. At that moment, a side quest is completed, rewarding him with additional store currency. With Ephirine finally back on track, Deculin decides it's time to head home. However, before he can leave, a white-haired man suddenly approaches him. Deculin immediately recognizes him as Zeit von Bugan, Julie's older brother and the current head of the Freyden family. Zeit is also the person most responsible for arranging the engagement between Deculin and Julie. More importantly, he is incredibly powerful. In terms of combat strength, he ranks above even Ganesa and is known throughout the story as a formidable named character. Naturally, Deculin becomes suspicious. He can't understand why someone like Zeit would suddenly seek him out. His thoughts immediately drift toward the Snowflare Stone incident involving Julie. Although Deculin holds no hostility toward Zeit, he remains cautious. There is no telling whether this encounter represents a serious danger or not. To his surprise, however, Zeit doesn't come looking for a fight. Instead, he casually brings up concerns regarding the recent relationship between Deculin and Julie. Framing the suggestion as nothing more than a friendly gathering, he proposes that they have dinner together. Seeing no obvious reason to refuse, Deculin immediately agrees. Zeit appears pleased by the quick acceptance and assures him that all the arrangements will be handled personally. He even mentions tailoring the meal to suit Deculin's tastes. It doesn't take long for Deculin to realize what is happening. This meeting was carefully planned from the start, and Zeit has already eliminated any realistic opportunity for him to decline. Knowing how seriously Zeit takes family matters and reputation, Deculin understands that opposing him without good reason could become a problem. For now, accepting the invitation is clearly the safest option. The following day at the Freyden household, Julie's reaction to the upcoming dinner is immediate and explosive. The moment she hears about it, frustration takes over. She openly expresses her dislike for Deculin and argues that her training schedule is already packed to the point where she has no time for pointless social gatherings. To her, attending a dinner like this is nothing more than an unnecessary burden. Unfortunately for Julie, Zeit has absolutely no interest in entertaining her complaints. He dismisses her reaction outright, describing it as childish behavior over something as insignificant as the Snowflare Stone. That response only irritates Julie further, but Zeit continues speaking. In his view, Deculin likely purchased the rare metal for a reason, since the Snowflare Stone is most commonly used in weapon forging. He assumes Deculin's intention was probably to present it to Julie as a gift. Rather than calming her down, that possibility makes Julie even more annoyed. She bluntly states that if Deculin actually showed up with the Snowflare Stone as a present, she would probably end the engagement herself. The remark instantly pushes Zeit past his limit. For a moment, his anger becomes so obvious that Julie immediately falls silent. After regaining his composure, he advises her to think more carefully before speaking. He reminds her that emotions have no place in political matters, and that decisions involving family interests cannot be guided by personal feelings alone. Then he asks a pointed question. He wonders whether there is someone else she has feelings for, noting that as far as he knows, there isn't a single man currently in love with her. Julie immediately rejects the suggestion and insists that nothing like that exists. Zeit then shifts the topic and asks whether her issue stems from Deculin's reputation and past behavior. Once again, she denies it. According to Julie, her feelings have nothing to do with that either. Her vague answer only serves to frustrate Zeit even more. Despite his growing irritation, Zeit eventually accepts her response and decides not to push the matter any further. Preparing to leave, he gives her a final instruction. He tells her to arrive on time for the dinner and advises her to settle any lingering issues before the meeting takes place. The moment he leaves the room, Julie completely loses control of her emotions. All the frustration she had been suppressing finally erupts. Gripping her sword sword, she unleashes a series of powerful swings fueled entirely by anger. The force behind the strikes is so overwhelming that shockwaves spread through the area and shake the surroundings. Hidden behind her, several of her subordinates quietly observe the spectacle. One of them notices the violent instability in her movements and remarks that her sword has become turbulent. The man speaking is Veron, a member of the Order of Hidokane and one of Julie's subordinates. Realizing that she allowed her emotions to show, Julie apologizes for exposing such an embarrassing side of herself. Veron, however, doesn't judge her for it. He understands exactly why she's upset. In fact, he personally believes it's unfair that the current head of the household is pressuring her into marrying someone like Deculin. Before the conversation can continue, Julie quickly warns him not to speak poorly of Deculin. Even so, she follows up by saying that none of it really matters to her anyway. Hearing that response causes Veron to fall silent. Julie notices his reaction but doesn't question it. Instead, she simply turns away and orders him to make the necessary preparations while she gets ready to leave. After Julie departs, Veron remains deep in thought. His mind drifts toward the path he has chosen for himself and the task he intends to accomplish. In his eyes, it's something only he can do. More importantly, he believes that completing it will ultimately bring happiness to Julie. That conviction strengthens his resolve. Whatever lies ahead, he has already decided to see it through to the very end.